Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to the Shebeen. I'm Barry Chandler and looking forward to spending a little bit of time with you tonight chatting about all things Irish whiskey. You're very welcome to the Shebeen, affectionately called the Shebeen after the cultural iconic element of Irish whiskey, I suppose Irish culture and Irish society generally, which is this hidden away room or shed or underground floor where alcohol is served and maybe it shouldn't be. There's definitely no alcohol license, but there's a lot of crack can be had when the pubs close. And when the pubs close, you find yourself in the Shebeen, and every village and town has one. So this is our virtual Shebeen where you're all gathering illicitly, illegally, but don't worry, there's no money changing hands for the drinks that are in your glass tonight. You've got those yourselves. We're going to talk about our new Stories and Sips Whiskey Club release tonight. We're going to talk about the Midleton Very Rare Silent Distillery collection because we've had some questions this week about it. And if there's any questions at all about anything related to Irish whiskey, I'll do my best to answer those questions. And if I can't answer those questions, I will defer to somebody perhaps more knowledgeable in the audience, of which there are many who can maybe answer that for you. So wherever you're joining us from, you're very, very welcome. In fact, let us know where you're joining us from and what you're doing. I'm joining from Cork today and just back from a few days in Venice. And they didn't have much Irish whiskey over there, unfortunately, but plenty of local spritzes and wines to keep me going anyway. I am drinking a drop of Dunville's whiskey for no reason at all. I'm drinking a drop of perhaps what is our next whiskey club release here, but I won't tell you anything about it for a second. I'll do my usual teasing it out until the very last minute. No, I'm not going to keep you waiting till the end of the night tonight to share what we're going to talk about with regards to that. We'll start with that in just a couple of minutes, and then we'll move on to the silent distilleries for those of you who are interested in hearing about Midleton's the oldest collection of Irish whiskies ever released. We'll talk about that as well. So lots of you in the chat who I haven't seen in a while. Great to see you, Dave and Cheryl, and there's lots of familiar faces as well, of course, and Greg and Richard, Paul Costello, Lisa. How's it going, everybody? You're all very welcome. Dave's come out of the woodwork here now because he knows there's whiskey to be had, and he's riling everybody up in the chat. Well, good to see you, Dave, and we've missed your energy here in the chat for sure. Whatever in your glass, I'd love to know. Tom's got Redbreast 2019 cask strength in Cape Cod. Lovely drop. Lovely drop indeed. Austin, Texas. We've got Kevin joining us with, for some reason, starting off with a Dunville's 10-year-old PX. Good man. Good man, Kevin. Richard's already waiting for the audio to go out. I've shifted audio ports tonight and I've tested them, retested them. But if the audio goes out, that's it. We're hanging up the boots. No more. We can't do this anymore. We're clearly incapable of a full night stream without an audio issue. Mark starting with a dark silky on Dreamy Cape Cod. A dark silky. I have a drop of that here. Well, that's the Midnight Silky. Is that the one you have? Yeah. Oh, no, you have the dark one. I have some Midnight Silky here. It's on my list to tap into again. Silkies are lovely whiskies. Good afternoon from Prescott, Arizona. Brendan joining us. Jameson 18 Bow Street in the glass. You know, that is one of the most underrated or under-talked about blends. A really fabulous blend, and maybe the best Jameson out there at the moment. Jameson 18 Bow Street, that cask strength blend. Brian Sharp has got Dunville's Carryout Killarney 14-year-old. I have a drop of that back here, which I haven't cracked into. It might be on the list. I have a bottle here. This comes from John Fleming's Carryout in Killarney, 14-year-old PX sherry cask finish. Let us know your thoughts on that, Brian. Colorado Springs, Steve is joining us. We'll drop a Dunville's Carryout Killarney as well. PX sherry cask finish. Excellent. Chris hasn't poured anything yet. Still thinking of what to have. Right. Well, listen, you better get sorted, Chris, because we don't want anyone getting injured with a thirst. That's the last thing we want. That is the last thing we want. Yeah, there's some crack already going to happen now in the comments tonight, I think. Richard got a flask filled at Bradley's in Cork, but darned if I can remember what I ended up filling it with. Right, Richard, well, your task tonight now is to figure out what you put in that. This is the blind test to beat all blind tests. Rick's got no pour yet, just north of Steve in Denver. Very good. Rob in New Zealand checking in. No dram because it's 11 a.m. on a Monday and he's at work. Drop a Barry's tea. There you go. A bit of Cork tea. Can't beat it. Can't beat it. Weeg has got a drop of green spot and happy Memorial Day. Yes, of course, Memorial Day in the United States tomorrow. And many of you interrupting. I'm sure you're planning plans if you're having family over or visiting family and preparing, whether it's cookouts or get-togethers. Obviously, a solemn but a moment of people coming together across the United States to recognize those who have given their life in service of others and those who have gone before us, paving the way for the liberties and things that we enjoy. So whatever you're doing, I hope you do enjoy the rest of the weekend. We are going to start off this evening with news that I suppose you've all been waiting for, because I've been teasing it across our social media channels over the past couple of weeks, or the past week certainly, and variously talking about it on the Shebeen over the past few weeks. For those of you who are not familiar, we run a whiskey club as well as doing this every Sunday night. It's called Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, and it came out of ideas and demands and interest from a 63-week run of live streams that we did during COVID, when everyone was locked down and couldn't go anywhere and there was no bars or restaurants or any crack to be had. And we tried to bring a bit of crack via live streams with guests and interesting kind of musicians and distillers and blenders. It was a great crack. And then one day I just stopped. It was just, I burnt out. I was a shell of a human from 63 weeks in a row of it. It was a lot of work, a lot of planning, but we all missed it. We all missed the crack, and the Whiskey Club was born out of it. And so for the past year and a half or so, maybe a little bit more than that now, we've tried to bring events, in-person events, virtual events, exclusive whiskey releases. We've teamed up with distilleries, with brands, with bonders to bring whiskeys to you that you couldn't get anywhere else, to meet the people behind them, to try and make it event-based, community-based, so you could learn not just about the whiskey, but also learn about the people, learn about the places. And we've had a good run of it up to now, and good crack along the way. And we've managed to release 5 whiskies in the last year and a half, and plans for many, many more this year. In fact, no harm in telling you now that in 3 weeks' time, we're going to be announcing another whiskey that's going to be available in July. So this whiskey that we're talking about tonight is going to be available in June. The next whiskey is going to be available in July, and the whiskey after that is going to be available in August. And I've got some interesting news to share with you in 3 weeks' time on our next collaboration, which I know many of you are going to be really, really excited about. So if you'll indulge me, if you're not part of the Whiskey Club and you've no interest in it and it's not for you, bear with me as I talk about what we're about to release next, because I know we've got many Whiskey Club members here, and you're interested in what we're releasing. I want to bring, with the Whiskey Club, like I said, people and places virtually to those around the world, in addition to the pours. And the whiskies we release are all exclusive. They can't be gotten anywhere else in the world. In many cases, in all cases, they're bottled exclusively for us. And nobody else can get them. And the beauty of that is that it allows us kind of a forum within the club to talk about them, to discuss them, to meet the people, to do live tasting together, and to have a bit of crack around them and explore Irish whiskey, especially the smaller brands that don't have the budgets of the big, massive international conglomerates and behemoths. It's a great way for us to kind of be the bridge between thirsty, curious whiskey drinkers and passionate, committed whiskey makers. And that's what the Stories and Sips Whiskey Club does. We've got quarterly tasting events with samples. We've also got a cask program as well that we'll be talking more about in the coming weeks as well. So that's what the Whiskey Club is. So where do we start with this? Mike says, a Shorecross Club whiskey made it to Anthony's auction today. It did, Mike. I'll tell you where it ended up. In my lot, in my shopping cart at the auction, because when I saw it come up, I said, I have to have that back. And I bid and got that whiskey back, because our club whiskies are so rare. And so, honestly, there'll never be any like them again. Once they're gone, they're gone. If I see one of our whiskeys at auction, if I can, I'm going to snap it up, unless it gets too expensive, because I want to have these club whiskeys for our archive and for future events and things and get-togethers that we'll have together. So yes, I saw that today just by pure chance. Anyway, I snapped it up. Okay. So let us talk a little bit about our well, let's talk about that Shortcross whiskey really quickly, because that was our last whiskey. But I mentioned we've released 5 whiskeys to date. We started with our first whiskey, which was a collaboration with Two Stacks Irish whiskey. We released a 12-year-old single grain called the Craic, which Dave Burke is there in our group named. Well done, Dave. This is the Craic. That was our first ever release, which was early in 2022. We then followed that up with 3 releases from JJ Corrie, all at the same time. So all of our whiskeys actually have codes. So SSWC, Stories and Sips Whiskey Club 001, is officially the Craic 001. So we had some other releases kind of before we formed the club, like the Story, and we had a collaboration with Talnua Distillery in Colorado. Those are not official whiskey club bottles. So SSWC 001 is the Craic. And then we moved on to 3 releases with JJ Corrie. These are the Cliffs of Moher releases. Got the 3 of them here. We had a single 6-year-old single cask, single malt in a Palo Cortado, finish in a Palo Cortado cask. We had a single cask, single malt, finish in a Pedro Jimenez cask. And we had a single cask, single pot still whiskey finished in an Oloroso sherry cask. Those were SSWC 002, 3, and 4, respectively. And then our most recent release in the last couple of months was with Redemption Estate Shortcross whiskey. Fantastic release. Maybe one that I'm if you can even be the proudest, just of our how lucky we were to get access to this SSWC 005 peated single malt from Redemption Estate, the first ever peated single malt in 75 years to come out of Northern Ireland, and we got it for our club, which was fantastic. So those are the 5 whiskies we've released up until now. You cannot get them anywhere else. They're not available anywhere else. So we're lucky, really lucky as club members, as I'm a club member like you are, to get access to these. And now it's time to talk about SSWC 006, which is our 6th whiskey that we're releasing for our club members. So the last whiskey, the Shortcross whiskey, was born out of our whiskey bus trip to Ireland in 2022. And our next whiskey is no different. In fact, great conversations, great connections, great crack was had on the whiskey bus, to the point where we're now on to our 2nd collaboration, whiskey-wise, as a result of that. So I have teased it to you over the past week, but I don't know that it's a massive surprise that we're going to Echlinville Distillery for our next whiskey. And it was one of the there was so much excitement around the visit to Echlinville, because it was an absolute experience that Jarlath Watson and the team at Echlinville put on for us, and were kind enough to open their doors and share with us, between Stephen, Seamus Ogue, and Graham, the distiller at the time. They really put on a fantastic experience. We had bluegrass dinner sitting beside the copper pot stills in the distillery. We toured the warehouse where some of Ireland's most fantastic single malts are maturing. We tasted from the cask in the warehouse. We toured the what was supposed to be a warehouse, but was filled with tanks and Ferraris and Porsches and all kinds of interesting things in the distillery as well. We met the distillery cat. We got to understand their process and their approach, and just really had a fantastic time. And I know many connections were made, and I know many people in our whiskey bus fell in love with the whiskies of Echlinville at the time, and particularly the Dunville's brand of whiskies, because Echlinville has been distilling now since 2013. It's a distillery that is maybe the best kept secret in many ways, because for almost 10 years now, they've been maturing the whiskies that they've been distilling, and have yet to release any of their own 100% fully distilled on-site whiskies, instead relying on the belief and their own value, that one of their own values, which is that quality is first, and so they'll release the whiskey when it's ready. And none of their Echlinville whiskies have ever made it to market. 100% Echlinville whiskies have made it to market yet. We had the first ever tasting of the Echlinville whiskies actually happened at the Southeast Whiskey Fest in Wexford earlier this year, and I was lucky enough to help set up the tables and pour the whiskies with Jarlath, and listen as he shared the great stories and allowed us to great whiskies that have come out of that they've been distilling there. While those whiskies have been sleeping, other things have been happening. It is an extraordinary distillery. It's an extraordinary property. It is a farm. It is a grain to glass distillery. Many of you will be familiar with it. You'll have seen pictures or videos of it. share a quick video here. Flew the drone over during our whiskey bus stop, but you can see the barley fields right in front of Echlinville House. This is all the one property. Quick dodge of the trees there by the drone. And as you go over the roof of the house, you'll see the distillery coming into focus. On the left-hand side, you'll see that pagoda on the left. You'll see the warehouses on the right, and directly ahead, you might even see the whiskey bus there, silver whiskey bus coming to the bottom of the screen there. And it is a unique location. It's nestled, it's on the Ards Peninsula, which is straddled on the left by Strangford Lough, to the west by Strangford Lough, and to the east by the Irish Sea. A unique maturation climate, and there inside the warehouse that you just saw, whiskies have been maturing that were sourced prior to the first distillation in Echlinville, and even a few since. And the warehouse door is open almost every day because it's where they're working out of it. They're in and out. The doors are almost always open, and so the wind is blowing through. And the Irish climate and that unique microclimate is really affecting the whiskies. You'll see here, that's the warehouse there, the whiskey bus right in front of it. There's the Echlinville Distillery warehouse, and inside there is the cask that we have chosen to be our next Stories and Sips Whiskey Club release. So the Dunvilles brand, you're going to hear a lot more about it over the coming weeks, because we're going to share the history of it. We're going to share the stories of it. It's an old historic brand. It's a resurrected brand. It's a brand that is steeped in history. Was responsible for massive exports of whiskey from the island of Ireland in the last century and early in this century. And we will be sharing that story and that history with you over the coming 2 weeks. Jarlath Watson, who many of you are familiar with, who runs so much of the distillery, will be sharing that with us through some video snippets that we've got coming for you. So you'll learn more about Dunvilles. The whiskies themselves, the Dunvilles whiskies, are a remarkable range. There have been some extraordinary single malts that have been released over the past couple of years that have won insane awards, including Best Whiskey in Ireland for a Palo Cortado finish just in November. They've picked up, I think was it 27 awards at the World Whiskies Awards last year, and this year, even in the Whiskies Awards in London, Jarlath was up and down for awards as well. They've just done an incredible job of sourcing single malt whiskies, understanding how to further mature them, how to recast them, how to vat them, how to bring them to market when they're ready, and they've built up a cult following. And so when we were there for the whiskey bus this year, I was lucky enough to sit next to Jarlath for dinner, and he quickly knew that was going to cost him, because I said, Jarlath, come on, we have to have a cask. We need a cask. Surely we can get a cask for Stories and Sips. And he said, Barry, if you want a cask, we'll get you a cask. And so I think that was down to the enthusiasm that was really exhibited from our community and those who've been in touch and reached out individually and independently and directly to the team in Echlinville, sourcing whiskies, looking for whiskies, trying to arrange delivery of whiskies, trying to figure out what's coming next. Like, there's been just a great interest in the United States for at the upper end of single malts, and Jarlath was just really thrilled with all the cracking conversations that have been had. So over the past few months, what we've done is we've been sampling whiskies. Any whiskey that comes out is going to bear Jarlath's name on it, because he's going to be the man who's going to sign the label that says quality assured by Jarlath. So you can bet that the whiskies he sends out for sampling are the ones that he knows. If any one of those are chosen, he'll be happy to have his name on them. Those will then be matched with the name of the person who selected the whiskey ultimately. In this case, me and a team of blind tasters who went through these whiskies, all of the samples, blind tasted them, kept coming back to this one particular whiskey. And that's the one that we're going to talk about here. So let me make sure I've got my right slides here. Where is Echlinville? Question came up there. So good timing. So Echlinville Distillery, Ards Peninsula, up in the north of Ireland. Zoom in there a little bit better. Let me put this more full screen for you. Not even an hour's drive from Belfast. So stay in Belfast. If you visit, you'll hit Echlinville, Shorecross, Hinch, Killowen, all within an hour. 2 stacks. So many within an hour of Belfast. That's where the Echlinville Distillery is located. Many of you have been there. Many of you have been there as well. Copeland Distillery, just down the road as well. So I mentioned the whiskey bus in 2022. That's the warehouse that we went into, cracked open some casks, really had an extraordinary time. Now, as they say themselves in the distillery in Echlinville, you'll never have a bad whiskey in a warehouse, because just the context of it, just being there amongst the barrels, amongst the wood, knowing that you're drinking directly from a cask, you're never going to say, God, that's a terrible whiskey. So the trick is to forget about the whiskeys you had in the warehouse and then sample whiskeys separately, independently, maybe in the surroundings that you're more likely to have whiskey later on, because it's not going to be in the warehouse again, or maybe will not be in the warehouse at all times, if unfortunately for us. But it was, I think many of you highlighted this and the warehouse visit in Bushmills and the tasting in Shorecross and Redemon Estate as being some of the highlights of our Whiskey Bus tour in 2022. So we sampled over the past few months. We eventually narrowed it down to 2 or 3 whiskies. The idea here, in terms of what we were looking for, was something that showcased the best of Echlinville, the best of Dunvilles in terms of the brand, which you'll learn more about. Something that could bring something new to you, and something where we would take a bit of a risk and a bit of a chance. So we have taken a chance, our fledgling whiskey club, because our next whiskey is well, it's an investment. It's whenever we release a whiskey, we must purchase the whiskey, and we must ensure that we can sell it, or we're not a very viable club. And so any purchase, especially when you're getting to older whiskey stock, is going to get the risk goes up, and so we have to manage our risk profile. And that's what we've tried to do here. But at the same time, start with what's the best whiskey, and then figure out how we're going to pay for it, and then figure out how to go to market. But the conversations we've been having over the past couple of months are not, let's do a whiskey and then Barry will enjoy it and off you go, but rather, how do we start a conversation with the whiskey club, with you, the whiskey club members, that goes on and on and on over the next few years, and allows us to maybe earmark very special releases, older releases, more extraordinary releases, things that might pop up that could be of special interest to the club. The idea is that this is our first step in our relationship with Dunvilles and with Echlinville, and I hope that we'll release many, many more. So that's up to you, the community. If you want them, if you like them, if you're interested in it, you're the only ones who are going to be able to decide it. So our next whiskey is SSWC 006, and you've got a lovely bird out image there, which some of you are trying to unscramble already before we go live. But before I just move on to the next slide, let me just make sure I'll check your questions one more time there. Brian says, I don't know, I'll never forget that whiskey on the bus as the sun set over Strangford Lough. Yeah, as we left Echlinville, headed back to Belfast, Jarlath said, sure, I'll come to Belfast too. And he jumped on the bus, and didn't he bring a bottle of the Dunvilles single cask Port Morant rum finish as well, which was fantastic on the bus. So we had a great old time. So we are going to be releasing a limited run of whiskey from Dunvilles, and it's SSWC 006. Here we go, folks. What we have landed on for ourselves is a unbelievable, it is a fantastic whiskey. It's a 19-year-old single malt. So old enough to drink in Ireland, 19-year-old single malt, and it has been finished in Oloroso sherry casks. It is a absolutely beautiful whiskey, and we were presented with a range of whiskies in a range of styles, in terms of finishes, in terms of ages, from 18 to 22, all the different sherry casks and different fortified wine finishes. And this is where we all landed again and again and again, blindly nosing, tasting, and evaluating. And we're really delighted to bring this to market under the Stories and Sips brand for our Whiskey Club members. It has spent 15 years in a first fill bourbon barrel. So aged for more than 19 years, but not quite 20. Aged for 19 years, 15 years in a first fill bourbon barrel. And then it was transferred and recast for almost 5 years in a first fill Oloroso sherry hogshead. So not an Oloroso sherry, but a hogshead. So a smaller cask, a little bit bigger than a barrel. So more interaction there of the liquid and the wood, and spent almost 5 years in that Oloroso sherry hogshead. It's absolutely stunning whiskey. I'll talk a little bit about it. It's in my glass at the moment. Bottled at 54.5% ABV. It's cask number 992. 700 ml bottles. This was bottled last year, so some of you eagle eyes will spot this. It was taken out of casks last year, just before the whiskey bus got there, because as Jarlath said when I inquired about the bottling and the casking and the scourging, is that they're monitoring the whiskies all the time to figure out when is the right time to take it out of the cask and put it aside in an inert container, so that when it comes time to when you've found the right client, the right route to market, the right opportunity to bottle it, you're able to do so. So they took this out last year, said it is absolutely ready. It's now is the time to drink it. And we're lucky enough to get access to this. There aren't many Oloroso sherry cask finishes of this age available. And this is the last of a certain batch that have ended up in some remarkable places. It's a green label, Dunvilles, which means it is a single cask destined for one single location. In our case, the Stories and Sips Whiskey Club. It's bottled at cask strength, and it drinks really well at cask strength, and it drinks really, really well with a few drops of water added as well. I'll tell you a little bit about the flavors, the toast, the nose, the taste, the palate, how we're going to get this, how it's going to work. On the nose, it's orange marmalade or orange peel all day long. Maybe a little sprinkling of a few drops of vanilla oil in there as well, but there's a hint of lemon. And there's that wonderful, like 10-15 minutes in the glass, this opens up, and there's that, I've written it down as the familiar smell of pencils that have been in their case in your book bag for a long time. Not new, freshly shaved wood, but that wonderful, familiar smell of wood that has been used, that has worked. And that's what I'm getting on this on the nose. Macerated apricots, like there's that lovely kind of a spike, like a spiced kind of spiky apricot note coming through for me. And then that lovely kind of fermented note, that sherry note, and almost like a white wine note. For me, there's a bit of a Chardonnay note coming through as well on the nose. But you could nose it for days and days and days. The abundant note and characteristic for me is kind of orange peel or orange marmalade right on the tip. But that just balances lovely in a lovely way with that kind of old furniture meets old pencil in the best way. It's on the palate, we've got, it's rich, chewy mouthfeel. I wrote down there, white pepper spice. So it's got a lovely kind of that snap, crackle, and pop tingling on the tongue of that white pepper. Sometimes we get a black pepper or kind of cayenne pepper spice on a whiskey. To me, this is a tingling white pepper. And somebody asked me before, well, isn't white pepper and black pepper, surely that's almost like we're getting almost the same thing there. But for me, it's the white pepper is like what you would smell a sachet of white pepper. If you ever smell a sachet of white pepper, that's the taste I'm getting. Cola cubes or cola bottles, we have these wonderful little kind of fizzy cola cubes in Ireland that they've got a lovely kind of wonderful artificial cola flavor in them. Icing sugar coated candied apricots, chewy raisins, toasted almonds. It's rich and it's unmistakably sherry finished. So, this is fabulous. And it opens and opens and opens in the glass. And so I was describing it to somebody during the week without giving it all away. And I said, to me, it's the malt equivalent. It's a single malt equivalent of a Redbreast 21. It's that balance. It's not a sherry bomb. It's not a overpowering fortified wine dominant whiskey. It's not a wood dominant whiskey. And in fact, it's not any of the woods in terms of bourbon or sherry overly dominant. It's a harmonious whiskey to me. And a bit like that Redbreast 21, I always come back to, or I think about when I think about a wonderfully harmonious or balanced whiskey. There's layers and layers and layers that open up, but no layer overpowers the other layer. And to me, that's what this whiskey has in abundance. It's balance and harmony across the board. Here are the details in terms of what's available. We're going to release 120 bottles only to begin with, and I'll talk about that in a second. And it's going to be priced at $285. So what we've tried to do is try to bring this price down, let's be honest, cheaper than you can get the Dunvilles of this age anywhere else. And we're also going to subsidize the shipping. So you're not going to be paying the shipping, the 40 or 50 euro shipping rates, like if you were buying it straight from Ireland. So like our other releases, we'll keep the shipping down low, $20, $25 for shipping, and then $285. The Problem in Ireland right now is that the dollar is really strong, so it's affecting it. If we were releasing this 3 months ago, you probably could have got it for 250, unfortunately, or 260. Unfortunately, the dollar is quite strong right now. It's kind of rebounded, and that's affecting kind of the pricing, and make it a little bit more difficult. But I think it's a very favorable price, all things considered. There's only 120 bottles available initially, and I'll tell you why. The cask itself yielded 210 bottles, and or 220 bottles, sorry, 220 bottles, maybe 218 bottles. And that's a big risk for us to take as a club. I'm going to be quite honest with you, because it's a massive outlay in terms of the purchase. And it's not, this is the first time we've released a whiskey this age. It's the first time we've released a whiskey at this price point, and I wanted to be able to dip our toes in. So Jarlath and Stephen at Echlinville were very kind enough to say, well, look, if that's the barrier to entry, why don't we start with, we'll set that cask aside for you, Barry. That cask is all yours. Start with whatever you want. So we'll start with 120 bottles. And if the demand is there, the other 100 bottles are available to us within the next few months. If the community decides, no, this isn't the whiskey for us, then those bottles will never see the light of day. They'll end up being married or vatted away and blended into another whiskey, and they won't ever be released. They'll disappear, which would be a bit of a crime, into other whiskeys. So if we want them, they're available to us. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to release the first 120, and $285 is the price point. Steve wants to have a good look at the color. So it's copper, it's polished copper, Steve, in terms of color. Let me hold it up there. I've got to hide my real polished copper note. So the new copper stills that we just showed in the Causeway Distillery, that's what it looks like to me. So what we're going to do is how the logistics for this will work. You know, I'm always as fair as is humanly possible, and sometimes it takes hours to figure out how to logistically get you days, how to get everything sorted. Do you remember the Cliffs of Moher release, what we did with this? So what we did was we asked you all to submit your expressions of interest for, if you could, would you like which one would you like? How many would you like? If you could have an ideal world, we're going to do exactly the same with this. So I don't want this to be a first come, first serve thing. And I'll try and avoid that for as long as it's humanly possible to manage. I want everyone to have a chance to get at least one if they want one. So let's say, here's what we're going to do. On Thursday, we might as well put this up here. We're going to open pre-registration. And pre-registration is basically a link that you're going to get that's going to be made available to you on our Whiskey Club website and storiesandsipps.com. And you'll be able to register your interest, which will basically be your name, your email address. And in an ideal world, would you like 1, 2, 3, 4, 20? You tell me how many you'd like. And we'll leave that open, that pre-registration open, while the bottles are being labeled. So the bottles are going to take about 2 weeks to be finalized and labeled, and us to be able to have the shipping links and the purchase links ready for you. So we'll leave the pre-registration open, and that's going to allow us to learn a little bit about the demand. It's also going to allow us to tell the story over the next 14 days or so of the whiskey, of the brand. You get to understand it a bit more. You don't have to make an immediate decision, but the pre-registration would allow you to say, look, here's my expression of interest. I'd love 2 bottles. And what we'll do is we will make sure that everybody who has expressed an interest in at least one, so long as we can fulfill it, at least gets one. And then we'll go back and we'll work our way through it again. And we'll try and do that as fairly as is humanly possible. We won't get it perfect, but we will certainly make sure that if, let's say, 120 people register, or 110 people say they want 150 bottles, well, then all 110 people will get the first 110 bottles. And then the 40 that are remaining will be divided up based on, we'll probably do a lottery system based on who registered for the next one, something like that. So that's, I think, the fairest way to do it. You tell me if it's not. If we discover in the next 2 weeks that there is demand for the 220 bottles, or even 160 or 170, we'll pull the trigger on the other bottles, and we'll get the rest of the cask, and then we'll bottle up all 220 of them, and we'll make them all available. And if they don't sell out immediately, it's no problem. We'll have them sit on our website as replenishment bottles, or for our new members who join, they might want one of those bottles. That's the goal. So that's our logistics that we're planning around this. This Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, we'll open up that link, and you can go mad. You can tell me how many you want, 1, 2, 0. If you don't want any, don't tell me. I'll only be disappointed. But it's, look, again, this won't be for everybody, and it's a small release. It's an expensive release for many, and it's an old release. So it's up to you if this is of interest. So let me have a look at some of your comments. Amy says the container will proudly be displayed on the shelf in our pub. It's a beautiful container as well to match the bottle. Here is the one for the Palace Bar. It's a lovely Dunville's container. It's the first one we've ever had with a container. And I'm really proud that our name is on there. Like, the Palace Bar is a 20-year-old Oloroso sherry cask finish. And I really like that we've got a 19-year-old Oloroso sherry cask finish as well. And the fact that Stories and Sips name can live alongside the Palace Bar name is a bit of a moment of pride as well for me and for the club, that that maybe we're able to do something like this and make it work, and that there's such interest in it as well. T says this sounds like a cracker. Rick says Barry C on the label. Yeah, my signature's on there as the selector, which means I had to make sure that I'm willing to stand over it as much as Jarlath was, and there's no doubt about it. Look, the cracking stuff that's coming out of there, cracking stuff. Dave says, stop teasing how many bottles. I think you know now. Is this my first bottle signature? Asks Rick. Is this my first bottle? That's a good question. It would be. Yeah, it would be. This is the first bottle signature. Richard said, got cask 991 already, so just waiting for its neighbor, cask 992. And Steve has sampled cask 994. Excellent. Yeah, I have cask 994 here as well. So you liked, did you like 994, Steve? Curious. Chris says, take my money. If I get another 001 bottle, I'm buying a lottery ticket. Vanilla soaked sponge cake is getting Amy excited. T says pencil shavings, a strong indicator of sherry. Lisa wants everyone to stay calm. Lisa playing mother in the group. Fair play to you, Lisa. Dave says you have 115 left if you sell me the 5 I want. Well, hopefully we can make that work for you, Dave. 110 says Brian. Steve's in for 3. All right. Hopefully we can get all these out to you. That'd be great. I'd love to get the other 100. Like, I'd love to commit to the whole 220. It would be a remarkable achievement. So, but again, I'm not here to put any pressure on you. If it happens, it happens. We'll do our best to get them to move. And Richard said cask 994 was sampled at Whiskey Live. It was fantastic. Excellent. I'm excited by this. Like, it's a moment of pride and of excitement and joy and just general happiness. This whiskey club is a crazy idea that came out of a crazy community. You're all crazy. We're all crazy together. And it's the same thing that the whiskey bus came out of. And it's the same thing that now all these things are tying together. The whiskey bus is leading, the community led to a whiskey bus, led to a whiskey club. The whiskey club is now sourcing whiskeys from distilleries we visit on the whiskey bus. And I have no doubt that on our next whiskey bus visit, there'll be more whiskey sampled that we will discover and say, we need that for our whiskey club as well. So it's a remarkable kind of a tying together of everything. So you're all to thank for that. So you should be very proud that we're getting these whiskeys. And again, this hopefully is the start of our journey with Dunville's and with Echlinville, and that there'll be many, many more to come. There's one whiskey that I have my eye on that I would love us to be able to get hold of. It's released once per year. There's only one of them gets released every year. The last one that was released went to the friend at hand, and that is the Oloroso and PX finish. It's an extraordinary, that's an extraordinary finishing combination. And I would love for Stories and Sips to have an Oloroso and PX finish in the future, all going to plan. But we'd be again stair-stepping up. And again, this whiskey, in terms of price, this whiskey is not for everyone. Please don't feel obliged, and do not get into any financial difficulty to buy this whiskey. Please, it's not worth it. This whiskey will sell. I have no doubt about it. And we take great joy in seeing people drink it when they can. If you're open to bottle shares and sharing it with one another, maybe that's a way to get hold of it as well. Some of you in the same town, city, nearby each other might split a bottle, and that way you don't have to incur the cost of a full bottle. I just want you to try great whiskies is really all. And we're just very lucky to be able to bring this all together. Thanks to Jarlath and to Stephen at Dunville's and Echlinville for helping us with this, and just being very kind and helpful and just generally really excited for us and with us in this journey. So it's a really nice thing. Caroline said, remember last year when you thought you couldn't fill the bus? I do, Caroline, I do. And every time we will announce a new whiskey bus, I will feel exactly the same way. I worry that we can't fill it. How about the Castle, says Bob. Bob not happy enough with a 19-year-old whiskey. He already wants it. He wants to come back to talk of the Castle. A Castle filtered whiskey is definitely has to happen. Richard says Dunville's has surpassed Redbreast as his new passion. That is saying something. And I have introduced people in our community to Dunville's and will continue to do it. And I have blown their mind with just people not realizing that Ireland has whiskies like this. And bear in mind that whiskies like this were only ever of this age, can only have been distilled in one of three distilleries: Cooley Distillery, Midleton Distillery, or Bushmills Distillery. And I can tell you it wasn't Midleton Distillery and it wasn't Bushmills Distillery this came from. So it's a double distilled single malt. You know where that came from, and it's got all the characteristics of a Cooley distilled whiskey, and it's a cracker. It's a great one. I'm going to be buying. I buy them the same price you buy them. I'm going to be buying a handful for our whiskey archive. So between me and all that have committed there in so far, maybe a third of the first allotment is gone, which is great. So Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, we'll send out a link by email. I'll send you out all these details tomorrow as well on email, so you have them. And we'll be sharing some great stories and videos of the history of Dunville's and the approach that they take at Echlinville over the coming 2 weeks as well. So you get to make your choice as to whether this is a whiskey for you. We'll keep you posted about the labeling. There's just some delays with labeling generally at the moment. We suspect it'll take about 2 weeks. So we're hoping that the week of June 12th is when we can ship, but that's a movable feast. That's something that might change, but we'll keep you posted. In any case, June, this will be shipping, all going to plan, middle of June ideally. And then in the next 3 weeks, we're going to announce our next whiskey. And it's another collaboration with a fantastic distillery, a new distillery. And we will be working with them to release the oldest whiskey they have ever released, which is exciting. And they are a relatively new distillery, but they have a fantastic whiskey for us that has been put aside, and really excited to share that with you as well. So lots happening. This is only the beginning. This is going to be a busy year for whiskies, a busy, busy year. All right. So thanks everyone for indulging me there as we shared that. If you're not part of the Whiskey Club, please, you're welcome to join. We will, storiesandsips.com is our website /club, storiesandsips.com/club. We will endeavor to fill everybody's order who wants one. And I know we don't have as many bottles as we do members, but we've been using a little bit of yield management and kind of data here to understand how many that might be of interest. And look, I know we're almost tripling the price of our last whiskey that was released, but I think a good whiskey club gives a range of whiskeys from as low as we possibly can to as high as we possibly can, and that way there's something for everybody. And I think over time, my goal over the next 6 months is that there is a storefront for Whiskey Club members of whiskeys that you can go in and see, oh, there's 7 of that left, oh, there's 22 of that left, oh, there's 30 of this left, but you can go back and reorder as you want for whiskeys that are only available to you, nobody else, unless they turn up at auction because somebody bought them and listed them for auction sale. But that's the goal. So that's why we're gonna roll one whiskey after the other and build out the most amazing, insane range of whiskeys that's coupled with amazing experiences, tasting events, behind the scenes videos, stories with the makers that bring all this together for us as club members. That's the goal. That's the goal. Thank you, Bob. Stories and Sips is a bargain for true Irish whiskey lovers. All right. So let us move on from talk of Dunville's single casks, because we want to talk a little bit about silent distilleries. And feel free to put your questions in there all night for anything you want to know about this whiskey, about anything Irish whiskey related, of course. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, you're welcome to the Shebeen. The price of entry is a like or a follow, subscribe. Just hit the like button, folks, if you don't mind. It helps us get more views. And typically more people watch our live stream after the event than they can live. Back in the days of the lock-in during COVID, of course, everyone watch live because, well, where else are you going to be? But we know that everybody's got other things going on. But if you're just joining us and watching the replay, and if you have any questions, you can always message me through all of the social media channels or on storiesandsips.com if you have any questions as well. And that's it. So this will be in your hands in the next few weeks, all going to plan. I'm excited. Thank you all for your support of the Whiskey Club and allowing us to make this happen. We have our eyes on some other casks and distilleries that are that we would like to do collaborations with, and there's a couple of new distilleries that haven't yet distilled that have really interesting stories that we'd like, maybe there's an opportunity for us to get an early cask in one of these distilleries as well. So lots of exciting things happening, and we'll communicate it all across our social media channels as we go. Amy's guessing the next one will be from Dingle. Amy, it's not. But it is exclusive, and it's never been done before. By the way, this also is the first Dunville's Green Label single cask that's destined for the United States. So you are getting a first. You are getting an absolute first. They've only been released on the island of Ireland so far. I think there was one, maybe half a cask went to China, but this is the only one that's ever gone to the United States. So you're really lucky. If you're in Europe, Ireland, UK, anywhere in the globe, we'll ship globally. In terms of pricing in euros, the price will probably be close enough to 285 in terms of euros. It'll probably be about 280 to 285 in euros because of Irish excise and VAT and some of the things that don't get applied when we can ship it elsewhere. So stay tuned. We'll share all those details with you. Richard says, Cologne, yes. All right, on we go. Some of you are going to be very happy with our next release. That's all I'm going to say. Lots of you are very happy with this release. What more can I ask for? Let's talk about silent distilleries. Silent distilleries. I was asked this week on a private message, Barry, what is a silent distillery, and is it something I need to be aware of? So over the past few years, 3 years really, there has been talk of silent distilleries in Ireland, and it's typically applied to a collection of whiskies that has been released by the Midleton Distillery. Midleton, Ireland's largest distillery, East Cork town, about 12 miles from where I'm sitting right now. Farming towns and some of the best farmland in Ireland. East Cork, absolutely fantastic farmland, barley country. When you visit on our whiskey bus in August, we're going to take you through the barley fields of Cork. You're going to see some golden hues of barley and grains that grow abundantly in East Cork. Midleton Distillery has been distilling on the site of right where they are today since 1825. And you'll see on the picture here, the photograph I'm sharing on the screen, what you have here is an overview of the Midleton site, and it consists of a number of distilleries. In fact, there are 3 distilleries that are on that site at the moment, 2 of them functional and 1 of them silent. So in the foreground of the image, you see the old red shuttered, windowed, stone-clad building, stone-built building. That is the old Midleton Distillery, and it stretches into the distance. You see the kind of the old stone smokestacks. So those old stone buildings are all the old Midleton Distillery, founded in 1825 by the Murphy family. Distilling happened in that old Midleton Distillery for 150 years. It ceased in 1975. And in 1975, when distilling ceased, it rendered that entire building complex a silent distillery. In other words, a distillery that will never make the noise of a distillery again. The stills were decommissioned, the stills were turned off, never to be fired up again. Coal-fired stills that were deployed in the old Midleton Distillery. To the top right of the picture is where the old still house was. Lots of warehouse buildings there, lots of grain buildings, grain storage buildings on site as well. It's been a massive complex for 190, what is it, 197, 198 years now. In the far distance, you see a more industrial green, tall column stack. That is the column stills of the new Midleton Distillery, which was opened in 1975 to accommodate the Jameson Distillery and the Powers Distillery, their brands moving from Dublin to Midleton in County Cork, so the production could happen in Midleton. And it was all put together and managed through the building of a distillery that could match the styles of all 3 distilleries. In other words, the old Midleton Distillery, Murphy's Distillery, Powers Distillery in Dublin and Jameson Distillery in Dublin. And the new distillery has been operating since 1975. So Asail Distillery, no longer in production. 1825, they started distilling, and in 2025, they'll celebrate 200 years of distilling on site. It's also the year when they will most likely open another distillery on site, which is the new Midleton Distillery, which will double the capacity of the new Midleton Distillery and increase its capacity to north of 200 million litres a year, which is a phenomenal amount. Right now, it's about 110 million litres a year. The nearest in terms of size in Ireland would be the Great Northern Distillery in Dublin or in Dundalk, which with its current projected plans will approach 57 million litres, I believe, production per annum in the near future, and that's all third-party producing, not releasing any of their own whiskies. In any case, Asail Distillery consists in Midleton of these old copper stills. These are the stills that were in the old distillery back when it was distilling. And so in February of 2020, Midleton and Irish Distillers announced a collection of whiskies that would be released to honor the hundreds of years, almost 200 years of distilling history on the site, and to recognize the masters of distilling that have overseen production on site over the last 40 to 50 years. And so they announced what they call the Silent Distillery Collection, a collection of 6 whiskies, all of which were distilled on these old copper pot stills in the old Midleton Distillery. In other words, nothing from the new Midleton Distillery. Everything released in this collection would be the oldest whiskey that remains in the warehouses in Midleton. In other words, when it's gone, and it would all be bottled up and released in the form of 6 individual releases. The first release in 2020, the second in 2021, the third in 2023, fourth for 2024, or the other way around, 2020, 22, 23. Anyway, 6 releases, 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. 6 releases over the 5 to 6 years, over 6 years, leading up to the 200th anniversary of the distillery in 2025. And that'll be the oldest whiskey ever released from the distillery. So in 2020, they released on the left there, the first of their collection, which was a 45-year-old single malt. And it raised a few eyebrows at the time, not only because of its price, but because it was a single malt. And Midleton isn't known for releasing single malts. It's known for single pot still whiskies. And single pot still whiskies are what Midleton kept going for the last 30 years or 40 years. And the first release being a $35,000 to $38,000 release. Only I think was it 44 bottles or 46 bottles, 48 bottles maybe were released. That was it, 48 bottles. That's all that was released. And it was a massive price tag of $35,000 to $38,000. And not only was it a single malt, but it was a peated single malt. And these are 2 things that aren't in any way connected with Midleton, peated single malts. But there were experimentations that took place in the 1960s, 1964 up to about 1974. Max Crockett was the master distiller. He was Barry Crockett, the master distiller emeritus, his father. And he did experiments that never saw the light of day. They were never released. But they trialed peated malts in the distillery. They never released them. Instead, they barreled some of them up, and some of them found their ways into blends over a period, I think, but they were never released as they were certainly in this form. So the chapter 1 released in 2000, chapter 2 was released in 2021, chapter 3 in 2022, and chapter 4 just released there now in 2023. Each of the bottles is hand carved by the House of Waterford. Many of you will be familiar with Waterford Crystal, not to be confused with Waterford Distillery. But each of the bottles, you'll see they're really called decanters, is hand carved. So each bottle is slightly different to the other, even within the series, because they're all handmade. So it's not like a machine is just making it to a mold. They're hand blown, hand carved. You put them alongside each other and they'll have slight variations on them. You see the kind of inlay there of the Midleton Very Rare logo in the neck of it as well. And then each of the cases is designed by John Galvin. And John Galvin is a Cork man. And he grew up in Youghal, not too far from Midleton, about 20 minutes drive from Midleton. And John owns one of the most sought after services in the world of woodworking or cabinet making in the world of whiskey. And John has a practice in Scotland where he makes bespoke cabinets for the world's leading whiskey makers, the Dalmores and the Bowmores and the Macallans of the world. John is the man who puts together the most remarkable of cabinets. So they're keen to share that these are not simply cases, but rather cabinets that house these remarkable vessels. And so he makes each of them by hand, his team, one by one, and I imagine at extraordinary expense. Each of the bottles that has been released, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, is 1 year older than the previous one. And with each of these releases comes a whole new cabinet, a whole new set of wood, perhaps that's used, whether it's Japanese wood, whether it's Irish oak, whether it's American oak that's used in it. John chooses the wood that matches each of the releases. So chapter 2 then was the first pot still release that came out as part of the signed distillery collection. Chapter 3, another pot still release. And chapter 4, which was just announced, is actually a blend. It's a blend of pot still and grain whiskies, the first blend in the series of the signed distillery collection. So you're kind of covering the whole gamut there, from peated single malts to pot still to a blended whiskey, all in the signed distillery collection. The subsequent releases from chapter 1, so 2, 3, and 4, have had more bottles released than chapter 1. So it's not like there's 50 bottles of each year. Chapter 1, I think, was 46, 48 bottles. Chapter 2, I think, was 70 something. I think chapter 3 was 97 bottles, if I recall correctly, in and around that amount, which means that there can only ever be about 45 or 46 or 48 full sets, because there's only 48 of chapter 1 available. So if somebody wanted to collect a whole set of them, they'd have to, first of all, source them all. If they source them all at cost, they'd probably spend $250,000 to $300,000 on or more on this whiskey, probably a lot more actually, on these whiskeys to curate a full set. So we don't share details of this as if we're all drinking them, but rather that there's something remarkable to talk about, because they are the oldest collection of Irish whiskies ever released. They signify a move towards luxury that didn't exist in Irish whiskey for many, many years, if ever. And it allows Irish whiskey to go toe to toe with the Bowmores and the Dalmores and the Macallans of the whiskey world, or the Yamazakis of the whiskey world, and allows us something remarkable to give a halo effect, hopefully, to the rest of the whiskey, the Irish whiskey market. We've had a chance to open and taste a few of them, all for charity. There I am nervously holding chapter 3 in my hand, and there it is on the right after pouring it out for some of you community members joined us there in Cleveland, Ohio in 2022. Fantastic event where we beamed in the master distiller via Zoom, Kevin O'Gorman, and blenders Dave McCabe, and who else joined us? Oh, yes. We had the blending team and the distilling team join us. Catherine Condon, assistant distiller to Kevin, joined us, and blender Dave McCabe joined us there. And we really had a fantastic night in Cleveland. Many of you dressed up to join us, all for charity. And we did it again in 2023, this time bringing Kevin O'Gorman, master distiller, over to Ohio to toast these are extraordinary whiskies, but also to raise a lot of money for charity, which we did. And last year we raised, was it 75,000? I think we reached with the funds raised, which was a staggering amount. This year, we're going to do it all over again with chapter number 4, and we're going to announce those dates in due course. But Kevin has committed to coming back to Ohio, and by the end of the year, we're going to host another event in Ohio where we'll open these for charity, and a select number of people, those who want to join, will be able to taste those in the presence of Kevin O'Gorman, Midleton's master distiller, and try them, and be one of the few people in the world to ever try them, all for raising funds for a very important cause, Malachy House in Cleveland, which is a charity that gives end-of-life care to the homeless and those that don't have any means of ending their life, spending out their days in dignity. So we're looking forward to planning that out. We're in the planning stages at the moment of announcing an Ohio experience at the end of the year. So as soon as we have a date available, we will share that with you. So the signed distillery collection, you can expect to see 2 more releases in 2024. You'll see a release that is a 49-year-old whiskey, and in 2025 you'll see a 50-year-old whiskey released, and that's it. They're gone. Then there'll be no more whiskies ever released from the old Midleton Distillery. Anything that's out in the market right now from the old Midleton Distillery, that's it. That's all that'll ever be available. And so you occasionally see whiskies from the old Midleton Distillery coming up for auction, but not very often. And when you do, they do command a significant price. Richard says he was told that Billy Lighton is heartbroken that the signed distillery collection will never be drank and are destined for private collection displays. Yeah, look, it's at anywhere from $35,000 to $50,000 a bottle. There's very few people in the world will be buying them to drink them. Some will, and I think some of them have found their ways to homes where they'll be enjoyed by people who spend that kind of money on things on a daily basis. It's all relative, I suppose. But when we were told that Ohio was destined to get one of these bottles allocated to it back in 2022, and I was asked if I could find a buyer for it, my first response was I can find 20 buyers, but they'll all want a piece of it each. And we all committed to opening the bottle and drinking it. And I think that's what should happen. They're all stunned in Midleton that we do that they can't believe this whiskey gets opened and enjoyed, and I think that's what it's for. To your point, Richard, the whiskey is so valuable that it gets a police escort from the liquor store in Ohio to Gormley's pub in Rocky River, Ohio, where it's been enjoyed, or where it's put on display by Sean Gormley, who's took a chance on this, on buying these 2 bottles in the last 2 years. Not sure if he'd even sell them out, but he bought the 2 bottles in the hopes that he would. And I suspect he'll do the same this year once we let him know that the bottle is definitely coming. But yeah, they'll be enjoyed again this year. But yeah, if more people could open them, it would be great. Caroline said I couldn't find a turtleneck tux. No, I couldn't. I'm retiring the turtleneck tuxedo. And next time I'm gonna have a tuxedo t-shirt. I think will be the more informal approach as well. Dave wants to know how long can whiskey sit in crystal decanters without being impacted. So it's these are long-term storage decanters, and to the best of my knowledge, there is no issue with long-term storage in them. The seal, I can attest, is strong. They are also plastic wrapped as well, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to prevent oxygen getting into the bottle to prevent kind of oxidation or degradation of the cork as well. And I don't think I don't understand that to be an issue. So there shouldn't be any issue. Old Midleton closed in 1975, the same year that New Midleton opened, and it hasn't distilled since. So in 2025, when they're celebrating 200 years, they'll also be celebrating 50-year anniversary of New Midleton Distillery, at the same time celebrating the opening of the new Midleton Distillery, which is going to be a remarkable year. So 2025, I'm already thinking, what kind of whiskey bus or Irish whiskey experiences can we plan around 2025 that we're all in Cork for that. There's also what else is happening? Next year is the 700th anniversary of the first mention of Ishkabaha, of Irish whiskey. So the Irish, we all claim that we invented whiskey, and we point to a note in the Red Book of Ossory, a book written in 1324 by a bishop in Kilkenny. And in 2024, next year, that'll be the 700th anniversary of really the origins of distillation, or the first mention of distillation, certainly in the Western Hemisphere, in any case. And you better believe we're going to be celebrating that and creating Irish whiskey experiences for you all in Kilkenny and around those areas to celebrate the greatest whiskey in the world in 2024. So make sure that any overseas trip in 2024 includes Ireland. That's all we can say about that for now. No, they're not lead decanters, Robert. They're just they're crystal but not lead. You're right. Whiskey bus to Ossory, indeed. In fact, the conversation has already been had, and there's a whiskey trail in Kilkenny, and there are many pubs and great whiskey locations and folks there, and great ambassadors for Irish whiskey in Kilkenny who are already planning things themselves and events. So lots to tie in, I think, with 2024 in Ireland. 2024 and 2025. You might as well stay over there altogether. Don't even come home. Okay. So when you do go to, what's interesting right now in Midleton is when you go to visit the Midleton Distillery, you mostly get a tour of the old Midleton Distillery, which is silent, and you don't often get to tour the new Midleton Distillery. That is one of the tours, but it only happens on weekends because of distilling that happens and just how busy they are during the week. But they are redoing the visitor experience in Midleton at the moment, and it's going to be ready by the time our whiskey bus gets there in August. So they're hoping to open it in July. So there'll be a whole new visitor experience in Midleton, which I can't wait to see. And it'll encompass all of the brands that they make there, not just the story of Jameson, that I think will focus in Dublin in the old Bow Street Distillery Museum and Tour. But Midleton will focus on Powers and Redbreast and the spot whiskies, and Midleton Very Rare and Jameson, of course. But it'll be a more encompassing, interactive experience, is my understanding. So that's going to be a great experience. All right, I'm going to move on to another whiskey, and you all can select it. What do you think I should drink next while we're celebrating the announcement of our next Dunville? Should I open the 14-year-old Dunville? Should I move on to something else? Do you want to? I don't have a Midleton Very Rare Silent Distillery bottle to crack open. You'll be surprised to hear, but somebody asked me today, will that be the next club bottling? Stories and Sips, Midleton Very Rare Silent Distillery. Can you imagine? Richard says Palace Bar Dunvilles. I have that here. We have the Palace Bar. We've two of these here. My friend at hand one might be downstairs. James Fox Dunville says, Lauren. No, I don't have that one, Lauren. Dave says, any of the old port cask left? The old port cask. Is that the one from Midleton? The Midleton port cask. No, that's Napogue. The one from the old warehouse, Dave says. Dave, there should be. But where is it is the question. Okay. I mean, I have a drop of this here. I should have blurred my screen there while I bent over and shared my plumber's backside. There's a drop of whiskey here from, well, you can see the color of it. This is a 32-year-old single pot still from Midleton, first fill port pipe. So it spent 32 years in a port pipe, 57% ABV. Little drop of that wouldn't go astray. You're right. I'll need a very fancy glass for that, though. I'm curious to know from you all what is from the new distilleries that are opening up and those that are maybe not as well known in the United States yet, but you're kind of paying attention to them through maybe online channels and stories we're sharing or news we're sharing. Are there things that interest you? Are there things that are there new distilleries that are turning your head? Let's say I see T. Cody there mentioning Bwaylock as an example. Bwaylock is a Ireland's smallest distillery, and if you'd like to hear more about Bwaylock, then let me know, because we have an opportunity to do an event with Bwaylock for you all, and we're interested in doing an event with Bwaylock and giving you a tour of Ireland's smallest distillery, which would basically, the tour would be like this, right? So imagine this is the camera, right? This would be the tour. There, we did it. We did the tour. It was a great tour. It would basically just be the founder swiveling in his chair with his camera and showing us the distillery. But they are making incredible spirit of Bwaylock in Donegal at the moment. Thoman Gates is Dave. Element is Steve. I don't have any Element. I'm a bit unsure about them, about their whiskey. I'm not convinced on the marketing of it. Thomond Gate, Ahascraw Distilling. Ahascraw is not distilling yet, I don't believe. Are they distilling? Yes, says Richard. I wasn't sure if they turned on their stills or not. I know the stills are being installed at the moment. Whether they were distilling or not, I didn't see mention of a distillation, a first run yet. Maybe somebody else can correct me on that. I'm trying to see what I've got here in front of me. That's there's interesting things happening with. I've talked a lot about Bushmills lately and Causeway Distillery, and the interesting things happening in Bushmills and the 25 and 30-year-old single malts coming out of Bushmills. Those are exciting and interesting. We've sampled some interesting things like the volcanic cask from the year 2000, so a 23-year-old single malt from Bushmills and volcanic. See if I can focus on that. Have you heard about the volcanic cask? There's only about 2 or 3 of them, I believe, in existence. That's quite interesting. Where a French oak cask was prepared for being filled with single malt, but before it was, basalt rock was suspended over the top of the cask and water poured over the basalt rock. Basalt is the stone, the rock, hexagonal rock you see in the Causeway Distillery or the Causeway Coast. There's metal hexagonal whiskey stone. And they poured water over the basalt rock and allowed it drain into the barrel, into the French oak cask, where it soaked into the wood, bringing the elements, kind of the minerals that come with basalt into the cask. They emptied out the water and then they filled it with single malt and they left it for 23 years. It's a very unusual and a fantastic whiskey. 2 or 3 casks of that in the world. That's an interesting one. I think we sampled that on a previous Shebeen. Do I know when the Causeway Distillery will be open for tours? Later this year is my understanding, Bob. Later this year. Ahascraw. Yeah, there's been an interesting conversation on Twitter recently about whether Irish brands and distilleries should perhaps consider pronunciation outside of Ireland when they go to release their whiskies. But Ahascraw is a village, it's a town, it's a place in East Galway. And you could name your whiskey something else, I suppose, but you're still from the same place. You're still from Ahascraw. But yeah, that's a tough one. Things like Slieve League, that's tough. But even Ahascraw doesn't make it even easier because they also have a whiskey called Clan Colla, which people say is it Clan Cola? Is it Clain Cala? How do you spell it? How do you say it? How do you pronounce it? Yeah, Ahascraw. Brian's excited for what McConnell's will be in a few years. Yeah, McConnell's are opening their distillery in October, all going to plan, and we're hoping to have some exciting collaborations with them in the future as well. Connacht is interesting, says Mark. Yeah, I have a call with Connacht Distillery. Connacht Distillery is in Mayo in Ballina on the west coast of Ireland. It's Mayo's. Is it Mayo's only distillery at the moment? They've been distilling for the past few years. They released their batch 1 single malt in last year, and it's actually a very enjoyable single malt. One of the challenges with Connacht over the past few years is that they seem to forever either be in for sale, like they've listed the distillery for sale. I think for 20 million you can buy the distillery, or 12 million, I can't remember what it is, including all of their stock. And they changed, a lot of their staff have changed and their key people have gone and new people have come in, and it's kind of American ownership, but I can't get any information about it, and it makes it harder for us to do anything with them if there's nothing to get excited about. So I have a call with them in 2 weeks' time to figure out what's going on, what's interesting, help us understand so that we can, if there's a story to tell, we'll tell it. If there's no story, at least we'll stop worrying about it. Dave says, one interesting thing we need to know about Bushmills is, where is Lauren going? She's keeping her cards close to her chest, in my understanding. Lauren, a big loss to Bushmills. W.D. O'Connell will be a good one as well. You name it, we have it. It's almost like you're a plant in the audience. 19-year-old single malt there. Look, I mean, I could taste them all, but sure what? I'd be sideways. I'd be beside myself. Everything Lloyd has found from Two Stacks has been really interesting. I think we should go back to Two Stacks for another release this year. And let's just say conversations have been started. Lauren said Bushmills only has 3 of those volcanic casks, and Barry drained us of a bottle. Theft, it would be one word for it. A bit like the high visibility vests that I've miraculously managed to extract from distilleries over the years. 2024 says Lauren for the tours. Okay, 2024 for the Causeway Distillery. We are getting updates on our Keeper's Heart. Our cask is doing great. We talked about it in a recent video at Brian Nation, and we're hoping to do an event for our whiskey club with Brian Nation to talk about our cask very soon. So stay tuned on that. Okay. Robert likes Boan, a pot still only distillery. Clonakilty the same, pot still only distillery. Blacks in Kinsale. Hopefully they fix some early pricing issues. I struggled to connect with Blacks in Kinsale. I mean, they're only around the corner from me, but I've never been, I've never visited. It's on my list, but again, there's one of the challenges is that there's so many great things happening. It's like, there's only so many hours in the day, and so the time always gets devoted to the most interesting projects, the squeakiest wheels, and those that perhaps extend a hand of friendship and say, we'd like to chat or show you what we're doing. And the others get pushed down the list, sadly. I'd like to clone myself, though. Mike wants to know, are we still having Bushmills on a boat? Whiskey Bus number 2. So Lauren is, as many of you know, has departed or is departing in the next few days. Bushmills onto other endeavors. However, Lauren has assured us that she will make herself available for Whiskey Bus number 2, because one of the days we have Bushmills on a boat advertised. But if Lauren is no longer at Bushmills, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to rename the event from Bushmills on a boat to Lauren on the Lee, because it's going to take place on the River Lee in Cork. So Bushmills on a boat becomes Lauren on the Lee. And we're going to choose, Lauren's going to choose a selection of whiskies from her shelf, from my shelf, from Anthony's shelf, and give you a fantastic tasting experience for Whiskey Bus number 2. So Bushmills on a boat becomes Lauren on the Lee. So you still get access to a great experience. You still get to see Lauren, and we'll have a great time on the boat as well. How about that? We've it all solved. We've it all figured out. Richard says Cooley. Lots of Cooley whiskies out there. Most of them will be older stock, because some of their newer whiskies, we don't see a lot of them in Ireland. A lot of their whiskey is, and this is not something that's talked about a whole lot, but Cooley Distillery is owned by Beam Suntory, large multinational Japanese conglomerate that controls a lot of the whiskey world. And Japanese whiskey is thirsty. It needs other whiskeys from around the world to blend with. And so Beam Suntory use a lot of the whiskies that come out of the Cooley Distillery per inside sources to blend with Japanese whiskey. So they get exported out to Japan. We do, however, see things like the Tyrconnell whiskies. We see things like the Connemara whiskey range. They are all Cooley distilled, as are the Dunvilles, most of the Dunville single malts. So the Dunvilles, certainly the single cask, single malt. So like our upcoming release, that's a Cooley release. It's a Cooley origin spirit as well. So there's lots of Cooley whiskies out there. Rick said, every good event planner is a professional pivoter. Dave wants to know, is Sailor's Home coming out with anything new? I don't know, Dave. Honestly, it's tough to keep up with all the brands. Sailor's Home is a small sourced whiskey brand. Great Northern Distillery, West Cork Distillery, and a few others supply a lot of third-party whiskies to individual brands who will build a brand around it. And they'll go to market with a maybe unique story, unique packaging, maybe unique finishing, or some variation on the original whiskey. And Sailor's Home is one such whiskey. They have lovely packaging. I know Dr. Jack O'Shea, a renowned whiskey distiller and engineer, was helping them come out with their first whiskies, and they seem to have, it's a nice packaging, nice story. I don't know if it ever made it to the United States, but I'll keep an eye out. I'll keep an eye out and check it. I have so many glasses here. I sometimes don't know what was used before and what wasn't. I clean them out so well with the old sips. Okay, I'm confident that this is a clean glass. So I'm. What's that over here? Oh yeah, this is I'd love to get hold of this as a cask for our club. It's a Clonakilty pot still whiskey, and it's aged in virgin American oak. And it's I had a sample of it in Wexford, and then I asked if I could steal the bottle, which I did. And it's an unbelievable whiskey. I'm going to pour a drop of that just because we're going to talk about Clonakilty in a second, because it's part of our whiskey bus. Clonakilty whiskey is another pot still only whiskey distillery, but they've never released a pot still whiskey. But I'd love to have this after they ever release their first whiskey. I'd love to get a pot still whiskey for our club. So stay tuned. Maybe we will. They're one of our stops in the whiskey bus. They're down in West Cork, the town of Clonakilty, right there on Galley Head, which is a beautiful headland stretching out into the Atlantic Ocean. Under the shadow of the lighthouse, the Galley Head lighthouse, they grow barley in the fields. It's such a great story. And we're going to take our whiskey bus out to the fields, and we're going to have lunch in the fields, weather permitting. We've got catering organized. We're planning to eat standing in the barley if it hasn't already been harvested. If it has, you can share the field with the crows who are picking over the field for worms. But we'll eat in the warehouse or in the distillery otherwise if the weather is not good. But we're going to have a great experience down there, and I'm excited for you to see Clonakilty. I know a few of you have been there before. Lauren, we were there we went down there for a trip one time. Great spot, and looking forward to sharing more about Clonakilty over the coming years as well. I like what they do, and their pot still whiskey is just really great whiskey. Never yet released. There's bound to be some. I see some of you, like you're sharing kind of some comments and thoughts on different distilleries and brands and how they make you feel and whether you connect with them or not. And that's one of the things that we've not had the misfortune of dealing with in the world of Irish whiskey yet, which is like maybe poor, bad actors or kind of bad whiskey, and just those that are maybe not out there for the best of intentions. And I think as the whiskey industry grows, we're going to see perhaps some brands we just can't connect with, or individually, even amongst those that are out there right now, some brands you look at the bottle and you go, I've seen it a whole bunch of times, but I don't know anything about them. I can't connect with them. Doesn't resonate with me. And you just go past it. And I think that's going to be harder and harder for these brands to make it into our hearts and then eventually our wallets, unless they tick all the boxes, and we're going to get more and more discerning as consumers. And I think we're going to be saying more and more, let's avoid them, or there's more interesting things out there, and we can't cover it all. And I remember when I started in the whiskey industry in 2016, just talking about whiskey, there were so few distilleries and so few brands that I could tell you it didn't take very long for me to understand every single whiskey that was out there, where it came from. Today, you could show me 20 Irish whiskies, I'll never have heard of them. And people in Ireland will never have seen them. And they've made their way out to Spain or Portugal or the United States, and they've never seen the light of day in Ireland. And there may be third-party source brands or distilleries are doing releases that they don't even talk about in Ireland or don't talk about in the United States. So it's going to be, it's interesting. It's going to be a really conversation-rich, debate-rich industry over the next few years. There's no doubt about that. Kevin has been to Egan's, has seen Egan's, a Total Wine, but don't know much about them. Egan's. We did an event with Jonathan Egan back in during COVID. Jonathan Egan is the founder of Egan's whiskey, and it's a family brand going back generations. And Jonathan resurrected it together with Brinkman Beverages, and he talked at length about, and quite openly about where they source their whiskey from. And they've got some old source whiskeys. I know, Greg, you're a big fan of Egan's whiskies. You'd probably be able to share more about that than I would. But good, honest approach, nice packaging. They've had some nice single grains. They've had some nice malts over the years. You don't hear a lot about them, though. But again, the landscape's getting noisier and noisier. I think it's going to be harder for the smaller brands to cut through and for us to hear all about them. Steve wondering how difficult it would be to get a club bottling from Tullamore Dew. The request has already been made, and they don't do it. They don't do single casks and have no plans to. So no plans for any single casks at all from Tullamore. Yeah, if we could get hold of that Clonakilty pot still in Virgin Oak, if you got now Virgin Oak is very hard to work with because you can over oak your whiskey and you can have an awful overly sweet characteristic to it when it's overly aged, when the whiskey's overly aged. This one in particular is fantastic because it's as if you took 20 bags of Werther's Originals and you put them into a saucepan and you cook them over a low heat and you let them all melt, and you put your nose over it just as the steam is coming off the Werther's Originals. As they start to simmer, you put your nose over it. And if I told you to close your eyes and I stuck this under your nose and said, here's a saucepan full of Werther's Originals, and I told you to keep your eyes closed, you'd nod your head in agreement. You wouldn't argue with me. Yeah, this is what's happening more and more. I see this more and more and more. Brian making the point that he finds himself concentrating on a few distilleries and bonders as they seem to never miss for me. So I see this, and I've seen this trend over the past 6 years, 7 years, as people find a connection. I know there's some of you in the group that are obsessed with Bushmills. There's some of you in the group that are obsessed with Clonakilty, some of you that are obsessed with Killowen, Two Stacks, Dunvilles, etc. And you find your lane, and you maybe connect with the people, the story, the whiskey, certainly, and you stay there, and you're saying, you know what, I'm happy here. I can't go anywhere else. Why would I? I'm so happy here. And I think we'll see more and more of that. And I think we'll see smaller audiences maybe going deeper for some of these brands, and not kind of as wide a net, but kind of building deep relationships, especially when you meet the people and you start to strike up conversations, and maybe you get in on their clubs or their pre-launch offerings, or there's bespoke bottlings, or we do things through the club. I think those are all great ways to find your lane. And I don't think you can kind of cover it all. Like you said, your liver can't handle it. I'm the same. Like I with the best of intentions want to taste everything and knows everything, understand everything. For the sake of my liver, which isn't copper, I have to say no, and I have to limit what I can drink. So if anyone's coming to Cork and wants samples of whiskey when you're in Cork, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to bottle up samples of things that I can't, that'll go bad on my shelf. Steve says we need a power single cask. Do we? There's 39 of them out there. I would like a single cask from Midleton, but I have a mad idea. And my mad idea is that, first of all, it's very hard to get a single cask done in large organizations and big companies, and with the best of intentions, it's just very hard to get done. But I'm less interested in the brand. I'm more interested in the distillery and the whiskey. So some of you will have seen the video we shared on our email this week, and you'll have seen it in the past, which is the tour of the Midleton warehouses with Kevin O'Gorman. It's a 20-minute video. If you haven't seen it, go to storiesandsips.com, click on the link that says the Still House in the menu, and you'll find that video. It's a 20-minute tour of the some of the about 60 of the 120 warehouses that are on site, both there and nearby in Dungorney Village. And Kevin shows us inside the warehouse that holds 16,000 barrels. And then we go taste something out of a Malaga cask, I think it was. But you know that there's stock in there as well as I do. That's remarkable. That's extraordinary. That may never find a brand home. Maybe it's a certain interesting finish. Maybe it's just, it doesn't fit the DNA. It doesn't fit the profile, because there's so much whiskey is put into casks that it doesn't know where it's going yet. It's just, we'll distill to what we know and age to what we can predict, but we'll have some experiments as well. I bet there's some experimental casks there that we could maybe ask, how about just a Midleton pot still of interesting pedigree and provenance and detail, and we'll bottle it under our own label. Maybe it's Stories and Sips Founders Reserve or whatever we call it. Community bottling, club selection. That might be one way to bypass the challenges of the brands and the challenges of getting something into the market that's already got single casks assigned to it, etc. So that's one potential avenue, maybe, to get to Midleton. Why not a Method and Madness bottle? They don't do single casks. So a lot of brands just don't do single casks. They don't do bottlings. They don't do individual bottlings. They'll do certain runs, but single casks are very difficult for large brands to do. Like something the size of Midleton, the work involved in diverting resources to a 200 bottle run when 120 million bottles of Jameson were sold last year is a big ask, and it's something that has been phased out mostly. And then you look at the likes of Bushmills, like Bushmills in Northern Ireland, they don't do single casks. They can't, or they haven't, or they'd like to, or the logistics are so difficult. And that's where you'll see us doing more with the smaller brands, because like with the likes of Shorecross as an example, I'm able to talk to David Boyd Armstrong, founder of Shorecross, any day of the week. And David has only one other person to ask if we can do something, and that's his lovely wife, Fiona. And together they'll do something and they'll make a decision. Same with Two Stacks, same with Dunvilles. We can get straight to the decision maker, and that's where it gets easier and easier. We'll keep asking, of course, and lots of questions will be asked and opportunities explored. But just from a logistics point of view, it's probably worth seeing that the challenges of the bigger, it's harder to get something out of a bigger distillery than it is out of a smaller one all the time. That is why the Redbreast single cask program has come to an end, Richard. Yeah, it's massive. It's a massive diversion of resources at almost no benefit to Midleton, honestly. I mean, it's a loyalty thing. The single cask programs were loyalty builders with good accounts historically, but the demand has outstripped maybe capacity. There's also some of the issues around like mature stock. So I know the question has been asked of the blenders in Midleton about bringing back certain releases, and especially those that are older. And the answer is, well, actually, we don't have the older stock to go into those things, or we have it already earmarked for other things. So it's a fascinating logistics study at the moment in Ireland. Some of you are mentioning things that I'm not even going to address that are already in progress, and some of you have you've hit on it. You've hit on it. You found some of the things we're doing. Fair play to you. But yeah, we've got lots in the works between the Whiskey Bus plans, Irish whiskey experiences, club releases, etc. So lots to kind of stay tuned and be excited about. But yeah, like there's so many great bonders and yeah, distilleries that we should do things with. I agree 100%. Some of you are just too quick for me. Some of you are already on top of it. That's why that picture of me up there is still there for the last 2 hours. we're putting lots of asks out there, lots of I'd be a bit of a chancer, like I chance my arm and say, can we have this? And can we also not pay that? When is the whiskey cruise? Says Kevin. Kevin, get through the whiskey bus first, and then see if you've got see if you're still interested in spending even more time on another method of transport with even more whiskey. I have not forgotten about the whiskey cruise. I was thinking about it today. The cruise industry. So this next week, so starting tomorrow, Monday, there's a different cruise ship in Cove, my hometown, every day for the next 7 days, or in Cork Harbour for the next 7 days. And it was just reminding me, and I saw a post about that online today, about how great it would be to do a whiskey cruise again. I mean, thinking about it again, how great it would be to do it and to fly whiskey bonders and distillers and interesting people in the world of whiskey to our destination in the Caribbean and board a cruise for 7 days, sampling whiskeys and maybe going to talks and panels and having dinners. And I think that'd be a fantastic. I want to do it. I would love to figure it out. And if it's possible, subject to insurance coverage and logistics capabilities, we'll do it. We'll definitely do it. Interestingly, speaking about interesting people, we will have Fionnán O'Connor, whiskey historian and loquacious expert on all things whiskey, who's currently finishing his thesis in California. He will be flying back to Ireland in August, and he will be joining us for a leg of the whiskey bus, which is really exciting. He may join for all legs of the whiskey bus if we don't stop him. If there's a seat on the bus and a room in a hotel, I can guarantee he'll take it. So he's going to join us for an event on our Whiskey Bus 2.0 as well. Shannon River Cruise could be within reach. A Shannon River Cruise would be great for about 6 people, but I'd say you'd struggle to get a boat with more than 6 people through some of the River Shannon. Oh, Dave, that's a great point. If you do a cruise, then the Grace O'Malley is a must. You have to have pirates. I think we'll be pulling in all of the maritime-related whiskey companies to try and sponsor it or put it all together. There's lots of whiskey experiences. So here's a question for you. For those of you who've done any whiskey experiences in other countries like Kentucky or Tennessee or Scotland, Japan, have you seen interesting experiences around whiskey that are more than just do a distillery tour, but rather like spend 2 days? One day you go fishing in the river, and then the next day you go, and then that night you cook the fish and you eat it with the distiller, and the next day he brings you to distill for the day. Like, have you ever seen interesting experiences? Because we're exploring experiences at the moment for Irish whiskey experiences, of which the whiskey bus is one, but we don't want to stop at that. I'm curious. We've got a list of, Anthony and I have a list of a lot of experiences that we'd love to figure out. So be curious to know if there's any experiences that you've seen that it would be interesting to maybe replicate in Ireland, because the Irish whiskey experience industry is still quite young, and there's quite an opportunity to maybe lay on some interesting experiences. Greg says, Barry, meet me in Kentucky and let's do the trail. I would love to. And I'm kicking myself that for the 12 years that I was based in Columbus, Ohio, I didn't take a 2-hour drive south and do the Kentucky, or the 3-hour drive and do the Kentucky Trail, which I should have done. I'm in Ohio on Thursday, but it's for a non-whiskey related event, and I can't unfortunately have any meetups because it's a bachelor party, and I'm in Ohio for 48 hours, and then I fly back home again. It's in, bachelor party, out. But so I won't have any time to do the Kentucky Trail. But it actually sadly coincides with I fly in Thursday and I fly out Sunday, so I won't get to be able to do a Shebeen next Sunday because I'll be in the air on the way home from the said bachelor party. But I would like to next time extend the Ohio trip and go down to Kentucky and see all the nice people in Cincinnati as well along the way. And Greg, I'll take you up on that offer then. For all the foodies, you could do a food and whiskey pairing tour. That's a good idea. Painting Barry's house and getting a few drops. Actually, this is a great business idea. I'm already liking this. Mark, consider yourself a consultant to the whiskey experience business. Odd jobs around Barry's house, bit of window cleaning, bit of vacuuming, all in return for some cask strength Jameson Black Barrel. I mean, the opportunities there are endless. I think there's no shortage of jobs that are on the list to be done, and there's whiskey available in lieu of it. So I think we're onto something there, no doubt about it. But food and whiskey pairing, I agree. How many distilleries have golf courses? Quite a few, Tom. And golf and whiskey is definitely a huge, huge, huge opportunity. Dave is always interested in the connections and relationships. More than 10 distilleries, so some sightseeing and food events as well. Yep. In fact, for this whiskey bus, we've dialed back the number of distilleries and instead have increased the number of experiences and also downtime to be able to do interesting things in Ireland as well, outside of just going from distillery to distillery. So we took a lot of feedback on the last whiskey bus on that. Italy's does some great food and wine experiences in the vineyards on the Mediterranean, feet in the water on the rocks. I think Lauren knows a few things about whiskey on the rocks up on the Causeway Coast as well. Richard is doing a Montana distillery tour next weekend. Oh, let us know how that goes. Odd jobs for odd tipples, says Brian. I tell you what, that's a domain name that should be bought. Chris says, I guess I should learn to golf. You and me both, Chris, but I wouldn't have the patience for it. I wouldn't have the patience now to be spending 4 hours doing anything. Yeah, lots of whiskey experiences anyway that we're exploring, thinking about, but whiskey bus number 2 is the priority, getting that done properly. And I know a few of you, like Brian, I think you're heading to Ireland as well for around the same time, together with 50,000 other Americans who are coming to the college football game in Dublin on August 26th. So I think there'll be a lot of Americans in Ireland at the same time. No touring Bushmills late at night. I would have to go back and do Bushmills late at night. Food and whiskey, says Steve, would be a fun thing to help put together. 2 of his passions. We will definitely share details of we'll share details, Brian, of anyone who's staying in Dublin after the whiskey bus who wants to meet up, and we may be tying in a whiskey experience with it. It's not confirmed yet, but there is a whiskey company. I can't share any more details. That actually has connections, very deep connections, with Notre Dame. So we will share more details about that as soon as we can. But there's interest in something happening at the tail end of our visit. So of our whiskey bus. So if that's something that we can extend beyond the group that's on the whiskey bus, we'll definitely share that. Richard wants to know, is any Irish playing with different woods for drying? So peat is still a very small part of Irish whiskey. So peat being the earth, the fibrous material that's cut out of the ground, dried, and then used for burning, dried. It's burned to create a heat source that dries the barley. Very few Irish whiskies, although we found 80 something of them compared to the 700 plus that are out there today, focus on that smoky side of whiskey, but there's more of them. There's more of them coming. So you'd have to separate peat and wood. So think of them as two different sides of kind of the whiskey making process. Once the barley has been dried, whether it's over a peat smoke, which would be smoky and apply all the peaty smoke and flavor to it, or a dry heat, which is the majority of Irish whiskey, which is a smokeless fuel like natural gas or smokeless coal, that would be used to dry the barley as well. Once that barley is dried, it can then be stored and eventually put back into water with yeast to make the beer, the wash that eventually becomes the whiskey. Only once it becomes a spirit after distillation does it find any contact at all with wood. So there's lots of different types of wood being used in Ireland: oak, chestnut, acacia, mulberry, and then within the oak family, American oak, Spanish oak, Hungarian oak, Portuguese oak, French oak, Japanese oak. So lots of experimentation happening. Ireland has more opportunity to experiment than Scotland would have when it comes to wood. Scotland's still relying on oak, or must use oak. So Ireland still has a lot to experiment with there. A lot of room to experiment anyway. Castle tours and whiskey, says Tom. Do we have a castle tour? Oh yeah, we were staying in a castle for this whiskey bus. We're staying in a castle for 2 nights. Clontarf Castle in Dublin, 2 nights. Historic location in Dublin City. Music is a definite, says Chris. I agree. Richard says, I'd love to hear the exploration of peated versus turfed. Well, it's a very... So, we're getting into the weeds now. Forgive the pun. The peat and turf are arguably the same thing. Some people say turf is what peat is when it comes out of the ground and dries. Others say turf is what we have in Ireland and peat is what they have in Scotland. But that's not defined. It's not defined in law anywhere. Some people have taken to calling their whiskey turfed to put some location to it, to say we're Irish, we don't say peat. But of course we do. We have peat bogs in Ireland and we've had them for 10,000 years. So it's a very individual thing. It's a bit like what's cask finishing versus what's a recasking. It's a real marketing speak more than anything. Like the Cologne, one of the Cologne whiskies says turfed on it. Doesn't it a turfed pot still? So it's really individual. It really is. Like it's a subjective approach to definitions. And you think about the other way around. As a consumer, actually, before we even get to the consumer, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, mid-1990s, let's say mid-1990s, John Teeling, who had started the Cooley Distillery, he saw how much Scotch was being consumed around the world. He saw how much interest there was in peated Scotches. And he thought, well, I have a distillery in Ireland. Why don't I make a whiskey that is already recognizable for its style and its flavor? So he made a peated single malt and he called it Connemara. And he will say to this day, he'll tell you straight to your face, the only reason he made it was to make money from selling it to people who drank peated Scotch. And he used the word peated because that's what they're familiar with. And he used single malt because that's what they're familiar with as well. And that's the style he made. If he had called it a turfed Irish whiskey, he would have sold a fraction of the amount, I would argue. So it's a subjective thing. And I don't know which camp I fall in. Like, I have to think my audience if I'm explaining it, but a consumer needs to be able to recognize what it is they're about to buy. And a turfed whiskey, I don't think means a whole lot to anybody, even in the whiskey world at the moment. Bono has recently invested in a brand. Bono has more than invested in a brand. He is the co-owner of the distillery called Church of Oak in Kildare, and they are very secretive about what they're doing. They have built one of the most state-of-the-art, modern, contemporary-looking distilleries in Ireland, but you don't hear a thing about them. But they're distilling. They are open for not for tours, but they're distilling. He's a co-owner of the Church of Oak in Kildare, believe it or not. Greg Anderson just looked at Adare Manor prices. Yep, the most expensive hotel in Ireland. Absolutely is. They've got the Ryder Cup coming there in, is it 2026 or 2029? And expect summer prices in Adare Manor to be 1,000 to 5,000 a night, I'd say. Richard says, thinking along the lines of Balcones, Brimstone, and a Cherrywood smoke drying. I'm not familiar with that particular whiskey and their approach to be able to weigh in there, but maybe somebody else can, Richard. But thank you for the question. $1,800 plus, says Greg, for a room in Adare Manor. Yeah, it's that is if there was a sixth star to be able to give hotels, Adare Manor would get it. It's the amount of money that's been put in there. The Brendan, the general manager, who I've gotten to know over the years, was explaining to me that when the new owners bought Adare Manor and they were thinking about what to do with it, the decision they arrived at was that they wanted to build the best hotel in the world, and whatever it cost to build that is what they would spend to make it that. And so it has been crowned like Condé Nast best hotel in the world, best resort in the world. It wins Ireland best hotel, best resort year after year, and it's because they're great at building a team and giving the team the blank check needed to make it the best hotel in the world. But that comes with a price, and so I think they put 50 million into its refurbishment, and then some since, and that money has to be recouped from a small hotel. So yeah, the prices are pretty eye-watering. So I used to work in Adare Manor. Like, as many of you know, I trained as a hotel manager in Adare Manor in the 1990s. And back then, I can tell you the price of a hotel room because I know the most expensive hotel room at the time was in 1997. It was £230 a night for a stay in the Dunraven suite, which was the most beautiful suite in the hotel. £230, which is about $300. And I remember Irish people coming in. If they were just, they hadn't booked a room, but maybe they were in the area and they thought, all right, we'll stay overnight or break up our trip instead of driving back to Dublin. And I lost count of how many times when I was working on the front desk, when I told people the price of the room, they asked if they could take the bed home with them, or whether that included all kinds of crazy, not fit for broadcast things that they get with the bed. I said, listen, that's the price, take it or leave it. But that was back in 1997, £230, which, I mean, that'll get you, wouldn't even get you dinner for one now in Adare Manor. But back then it got you the nicest suite in the hotel. All right, we have on Spalpeen Spannock abroad in Spain giving us the recommendation for a Stories and Sips Spanish Armada History Whiskey Cruise. Well, if it's okay, so whiskey cruise starting in Malaga, take in Cadiz, Seville, Jerez, Lisbon, Madeira, La Coruña, Portsmouth, Scotland, Causeway Coast. We'd never get home. And Wild Atlantic Way. So we'd have to storm Kinsale if we're going to do that. We'd have to land on the beaches in Kinsale. Finishing in Cove. Be great fun, wouldn't it? The challenge with cruises in the Mediterranean has always been the weather, especially when you include the Western Europe, like the British Isles and Ireland, etc. It's always the weather is the problem. You're dressed maybe for the warmth of the south of Spain, and then you come over to Ireland and you're freezing. But that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? That'd be great. That'd be great. Greg, book it. Can't take it with you, he says. That's it. That's the spirit. I'd love to do something with Spain. Lots of great history and stories there to go with them. And actually, there's the Red Earl whiskey, Kinsale Spirits. There's a distillery being built in Kinsale. Actually, they've got land. They're about to break ground on a distillery, and it's owned by the Kinsale Spirits Company, who have the Red Earl whiskey, Kinsale gin, and I've spoken to the owner, Ernest Cantillon, for our podcast back in the day, Stories and Sips podcast, when we first did that and nothing else. He's a character in Cork who owns a few bars in the city as well, and he's behind that. So there's something interesting that could happen in Kinsale there as well. Greg's inviting us all to share the room in Adair Manor with him. So when he books it, Greg, be sure to share the room reservation number and that we can all get in on this. Thank you for the very kind offer. All right. We finished the Clonakilty. We finished the Dunvilles. I might have one more in me. It's 2:00 in the morning. Brian's onto the Dunvilles 20-year-old Oloroso sherry. So Adair Manor probably has the most expensive Irish whiskey in Ireland too. Their whiskey list is the most eye-watering whiskey list you'll ever see. But they have silent distilleries open. They have Midleton Pearls open. They have their own Midleton Adair Manor, Midleton Very Rares. They've had 3 releases, 3 expressions. 2 of them I think they still have. But they're gearing up for a Ryder Cup worthy list of whiskies so that when the winners want to spend their prize money, they'll happily take it in the tackroom bar underground in Adair Manor. Greg has now shifted his offer to invite everyone to Florida to stay with him instead. Seeing as Lauren is in the audience there, we'll have to do a drop of Bushmills. But which drop? Which drop? If you have just joined us, we're at the tail end of the Shebeen. We've announced our whiskey, our next club whiskey. For those of you who missed it when you joined, just very briefly, we are put it up on the screen here. Our next whiskey is a single malt, 19-year-old single malt from Dunvilles, 19 years maturing in wood, 15 of those in bourbon barrels, and then almost 5 of them, 4 years and about 10 months in an Oloroso sherry cask, a hogshead. So it's like a 250 liter, between 250, maybe 300 liter cask. And it's our next whiskey club release. And Thursday is when pre-registration opens. So everyone who's on our email list will get a link. We'll put the link up as well on our social media on Thursday. 7:00 registration will open. It's not a first come, first served. So anyone who wants to register to share your interest, you're not committing anything except to tell us what we should expect. We hope that you stick to what you tell us you want. But I understand plans change. But in any case, we want you to share your interest in this whiskey with us, and then we will be able to fulfill accordingly and make sure everyone who wants a bottle, within reason, hopefully we can give everyone who wants a bottle. And for those who want 2 or 5, maybe we can get those as well. Lauren said you should have the sauternes that I stole, which she spies on my top shelf. How can you spy anything on that blurred top shelf? Okay, we'll have that. I will drink this, but reject the accusation of theft from Lauren. So this will be our nightcap. This is a whiskey that Lauren is very proud of. 2011 Causeway Collection Sauterne cask. Because, well, maybe Lauren, you can share more about it, because wasn't this part of this was the first Causeway Collection. Floated in on some rocks, says Greg. So we're going to have the 2011 Causeway Sauternes cask. And I get so lost on there's so many Causeway releases and so many years and ages and countries of release. This was the first one, wasn't it? Gratefully left behind post Shebeen. If people bring whiskies here and they leave them standing there for long enough, they'll manage to find their way onto a shelf, and that'll be the end of them. Now, how about that? We also solved Richard's problem of trying to identify what was in his hip flask that he got at Bradley's off license in Cork last week. It's the Bushmill Sauterne. Second set of Irish exclusive Causeways, says Lauren. Here we go. 10-year-old malt, 8 years ex-bourbon and sherry, and then 2 years finishing Sauterne cask. A wine cask. Sláinte. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for tuning in tonight to the old Shebeen. This will be, I won't have any next week. Traveling next week, next Sunday, unfortunately, but we'll be back again the following week. I'll be sleeping off a 48-hour bachelor party on a flight. Kevin's going to join us with a drop of Black Bush. No better drop. I would have almost chosen that myself. I have some Black Bush here. The 80-20. If you see this, by the way, in an airport, because it's a travel retail exclusive, this is worth picking up. It's ridiculously cheap. This is 80-20 Black Bush, which has a Pedro Jimenez sherry cask finish. So it's the Black Bush you kind of know and love, but it's got a it's finished in a Pedro Jimenez sherry cask. %, single malt finished in Pedro Jimenez sherry barrels, actually, not married together, and then married with a 20% small batch grain. This Black Bush is, and the regular Black Bush is the best value blended whiskey in Ireland. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. 80% malt, only 20% grain. Normally it's the other way around with blended whiskies. 80% grain or 90% grain or 95% grain and only 5% malt. Kevin wants to know, am I providing the whiskey for the bachelor party? I'm providing the Irish whiskey, but it's a very whiskey heavy group of 8 people. And the 7 of them, actually a few of them are in our whiskey club, but 7 of them are very big bourbon drinkers. I mean, deep into the world of bourbon and have access to some extraordinary bourbons. I'm going to go over with a drop of Redbreast 21 as my offering and say, if you want to know a good Irish whiskey, here's a drop for you. I'm going to try and wow them with a drop of Redbreast 21. And then maybe a backup of a short cross peated to blow their minds. So that's my goal. There's such a DNA to a Bushmill single malt, isn't there? It's unmistakable. And what's been great fun for me over the past few years is getting to know the DNAs of distilleries in terms of a profile of a whiskey, of a malt or a pot still, that you know as soon as it touches your lips where it came from. And it's one of those unfortunate things that only comes with practice, in the sense that the more I'm introduced to more whiskies, the more I try them, and the more I discover, okay, so Dingle has that kind of profile. Waterford's that profile. Bushmills is that profile. And it becomes unmistakable. And you start looking out for the smaller details, the finishes, the little lighter notes, or the more nuanced notes beyond that core profile. But this is a Bushmill whiskey all day long. How is that possible? Like, it can't be the mics. These are different mics all the time. Wild. That should be fixed now. Hopefully it's fixed. Hopefully it's fixed. He's given up tonight. Walked out, says Lauren. Put another euro in the mic. It's 100% after the 1.5 to 2 hour time frame. Can you hear me now? It's good now, all right, yeah. Crack and crack. It never ends. I don't know how we're going to ever fix this. Maybe it's the computer. We're going to throw out the computer. Anyway, what I was saying is how JFK really died was. Blame Elon. We do have, I mean, I don't know how our satellites are affecting this, but sure, look. We caught this fast, though. We caught this fast. Last time I was talking about half an hour, waxing lyrical, loving hearing the sound of my own voice. Nobody else is hearing it. Too many alcohol fumes in the air after 2 hours. We've been on what now? Yeah, 2 hours. That's wild, isn't it? I'm going to get to the bottom of it. Not tonight, though. Lauren, now that you're leaving Bushmills, are there any secrets you want to tell us? Things we should know? And where are the secrets stored? Where's the special whiskey? What's the secret password for access to certain whiskies when we do the tours up there and you're not there? What do we need to know? Who do we need to ask for? Spill the beans, spill the tea, spill something for us. There's a kind of like a burnt wood note in the Sauternes cask, Lauren. I don't know if you ever get that. It's not a smoky note, but there's it's like a toasted wood or a charred wood note that's quite prominent for me in the Sauternes cask. There we go now. A straw and a bit of willpower, and we can get in the back way. Give us the code for the gate. Richard, I've all the high vis vests here just to show up. I've even got a hard hat. I've got a blank, a non-logoed hard hat for added convincibility. 16 at 08. See, I knew it. Everything is 1608 in Bushmills. Well, folks, I think we have reached the legitimate end, the reasonable end. The microphones are telling us, give up, you lunatic. You've done enough, you've said enough, you've talked enough. I'm very excited that this week we get to open up the expressions of interest page for our Dunville single cask. I'm excited to continue our journey in the world of the whiskey club. And I think you'll be excited by our next announcement too in 3 weeks' time. And as always, let me know if there's anything else you want to see in the club. I get some good messages from you on a regular basis about whether it's for brands or distilleries or questions that you have, and we'll try and answer them or record them or put a video together or an article together for you. But working on our next sampling as well. Trying to get a Teeling tasting over the line with maybe a warehouse sample as well for you at the moment, and a couple of other things that we're working on with quarterly tastings as well. So stay tuned, and we're working on an annual subscription and some opportunities and offers to pay in different ways for people who want to do that. So lots on the go. Lots on the go. Lauren also agrees on the wood note. The Succession finale. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. Don't give it to me. I'll be watching it tomorrow. I cannot look at social media until I've seen the Succession finale. Brian, thank you very much for that. That's great. Great feedback. Means a lot. Means a lot. We'll continue to do what we're doing. And we'll continue to work with some great distilleries and brands and release great whiskies and have the craic along the way. Thursday notice will be going out. We'll send an email tomorrow, Greg, and give you all the details. And then on Thursday, I'll send you the link to the page where it'll go live. And then just let me know how many you want. 1, 2, 10, 20, 0, whatever it is. You tell me what you're interested in, and then I'll work on the back end to manage it all and make sure that everybody's happy and gets what they need. And we work to showcase the beautiful Echlinville Distillery and Dunville's brand and make sure they have all the chance to talk about what they're doing as well. So, Shine, that's it. Slaunch, everybody. And as Greg says, for the love of God, hit the like button. That's all we want. That's all we want. You don't even have to pay for that. That's free. We won't ever ask you for money for that. Slaunch, thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Look forward to sharing and dropping Dunville's with you.